Tonight I'm going to show you my 10 latest French cleat tool holders. This tool holder is just actually a fancy pencil holder. I could have made it square, I could have made it much more boring, but this was fun. I decided to make some hexagons. These are made from Baltic birch, and I tried a different way of doing the joinery so that you could see the exposed Baltic birch edges. The base is traced directly from the glued up hexagon, so it's a perfect fit. Each of the angles on these are still 30 degrees, but they overlap each other and do kind of a pinwheel design. I'm using CA glue for the quick drying benefits of holding it in place, and wood glue to add strength to the joint. For this one, I also used a locking key so that it doesn't get knocked off because it's kind of low down and close to the workbench area. I even ended up with this little triangle in the back, which is perfect to store my scissors. Let's talk about my screw bin organizer. As I was working on projects on my workbench, I realized that I had these screw bins all over the place on the workbench as I was using certain fasteners, and they would get in the way. So I decided to make a tool holder so they could be off the workbench and out of the way, but still accessible. This construction is pretty simple, but the angle with it leaning out makes it so you can reach in more easily and get the screws you need out of the bin. I've really found that for these small tool holders, the CA glue and wood glue combination works really well. Most of the weight on this is also hanging off the back, so I reinforced these joints with screws so I wouldn't have boxes falling off onto my workbench. It's always good to have some extra pre-cut cleats around for making all these tool holders. This thing is great. I can take it and I can swap out the screws for whatever sizes I'm using at that time. I've used it on 2 projects now and I love it. The next tool holder is actually a modification from a previous one that I did. I had previously made a hand plane till that would sit at an angle out from the wall. Once I had it hanging up on the wall, I realized that this would be a perfect place to store my design notebook, which is normally just getting pushed around the workbench and getting in the way. The design of this mechanism has a sliding tray that can be pushed up and locked in place with magnets. The tray is prevented from falling out by a small French cleat on the back, which also prevents any rattling of the tray while I'm writing on it. I initially tried using just one magnet, but that wasn't strong enough, so I added 2 more magnets, which worked great. After a little slide ease to grease the skids, it was ready to go. This one is by far my favorite of all the tool holders that I'm talking about tonight because it's so functional and it gives me so much more space on my workbench. This tool holder is one of 4 different types of clamp racks that I've made to be hung on French cleats. This rack is used to hold my most frequently used clamps, my Bessie trigger clamps. This probably could have just been a flat board to clamp to, but I like how the small notches help to space them evenly across the board. This makes my OCD happy. I keep this right at my workbench level because sometimes I don't think ahead and bring clamps over to the workbench, so I'm holding something together and then I'm like, oh, I need to clamp this. These ones are quick access right on the workbench, ready to go, but again, they're out of the way so that I can have a full open workspace underneath. For my next holder, I needed to add a new section of French cleats on an open wall, using this nifty laser stud finder from Craig. This section is small, but I'm going to use it to store a bunch of heavy clamps and jigs, so I put 2 fasteners into each mounting point on the wall. The spacers between each cleat make it so you can just level out your bottom cleat and then install all the others using the spacer blocks. This tool holder is design number 2 for holding clamps. Just for fun, I decided to challenge myself to make a few different clamp rack designs to exercise those design muscles. This one has a single support underneath and a flat top and is sized to hold my bar clamps. This may not look super sturdy, but it's actually very strong. This tool holder is designed to take a lot more weight and hold a different type of clamp. This design has the French cleats integrated into the supports. By doing this, the cleats can handle even more weight. After cutting them to the size I wanted, I set them in place on the French cleats and realized that the clamps I wanted to store in them couldn't open big enough to slide all the way back to the wall. So I marked the area that I wanted to remove and cut the supports again. After gluing in a spacer between the two sides, I tested it out on the wall, and this time it works perfectly. This is my fourth tool holder design, and this one is designed to hold some very specific trigger clamps. These are the big ones that I don't have room for by the workbench. You notice that there are different heights here. This is because of the shape of these clamps. They have to be staggered to be able to account for the curve on this top edge. You can use this design also for the large parallel clamps. You just have to bring this down so that they're both at the same level. This is my shop boombox. This was designed to fit my phone in it so that I can have a little passive amplifier for whatever I'm listening to. Sometimes I'm listening to a podcast or something like that. Sometimes it's music. This takes the volume from my phone and steps it up a notch. To make one of these, you just need a hole that goes from the phone speaker to a larger bell shape. And that's when the blade broke. I'm pretty sure that the exact shape and size of the channel and bell affect the acoustic qualities, but for this experiment, this design does the job and it looks pretty good too. I'm using a 45-degree chamfer bit to create the rough bell shape on each layer of Baltic birch plywood. It was fun to see all the plywood layers on the edges of the glue-ups. This is also thick enough that I can just bring it with me and set it somewhere if I'm not working right at my workbench. This one is my squares rack, which also holds some other measuring tools that I have. This holds my most commonly used squares, as well as my compass and my mortise and tenon marking gauge. It also holds my 12-inch ruler with a magnet on the side. So this has some cool features on it. These are the things I'm using right now. If I get something new, I may have to modify this or make a new one. I always cut off the corners on these thin slits, so it's easy to find the slot with your tool when you're putting it away. Most of these squares also don't weigh very much, so this is a tool holder that doesn't need to be super sturdy. But it's nice to have them all easily accessible now. This tool holder appears to be just a big block, but what this actually is a holder for my marking knives. As I was doing a mock-up of this, I noticed that the marking knives would kind of rattle back and forth like this. So I decided to put a taper on this, so there's a wedge. It's actually thicker at the top than at the bottom, so that as you put the knife in, it gets narrower and holds that blade a little bit tighter in place. Not enough that I can't get the knife out, but just enough so that when I use my leaf blower to blow the air off of this, it's not going to send these flying. One of the fun things about these French Cleat tool holders is you can be really creative and try new things. And if it doesn't work, scrap it and try again. One of the nice things about these French Cleat tool racks is you can use scrap wood that you have laying around. You can use nice hardwood, Baltic birch, cheap plywood. You can use whatever you want. And as long as they hold the tools and they're doing the job, that's all you need. I'm really loving the French cleats, and contrary to what some people say about French cleats, I do actually move them around a fair amount. Let me know if you have French cleats in your shop and what your favorite tool holder is. Now, go build something, and we'll see you next time.